Over the last year, for those of you who have been following along, I know you've been seeing me shaking things up here in the podcast studio, shaking up the lineup this time last year at the start of 2025. And then bringing in my client, Tracy Allen, to ride shotgun with me, to have that client's perspective and really putting the spotlight on me and illuminating some of my expertise after 20 years in this space, on this mission, in and around, the ways that I show up in service to my leaders and clientele in the trenches. And I think you saw coming into the summertime that we really started to play with this curiosity that was opening up for us in 2025 in and around conscious leadership.
Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Podcast, the Legacy Edition, where conscious leaders unite to unlock their highest potential so collectively we can change the way the game is being played.
Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Podcast, changing the way this game is being played. And guess what? It's just you and I today. That's right. I'm flying solo because, I decided that today was going to be the day. I've been thinking about this for the last probably month or so, but I woke up feeling really called to, make today the final episode of the Leadership Launchpad podcast. We've been running this podcast for 6 years now, ever since the start of the pandemic, when we first launched this podcast platform in response to one of the greatest disruptions I certainly had ever lived through or experienced as a mother and a business owner and a leadership coach. And so I woke up this morning and I decided that today was going to be the last episode. And it's a decision, like I said, I've been thinking about for the last month or so. And for those of you who follow along each week, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being my teammate on this mission over the last 6 years. Some of you I know have been following along since the very beginning. And like I said, at the very beginning, I just felt so called to get on this mic, even though I'd never done a podcast before. I just felt so called to want to get on and serve our leaders when we were going through that cataclysmic level disruption, right? There was so much uncertainty. We were thrust into a bunker overnight. And that obviously threw our leadership into a tizzy. And that's where we birthed this whole Leadership 2.0 mission, in fact, back at the start of 2020, right? This heart-centric, human-centric leadership style, right? That was, we believe, at the beginning of this mission, packed the power and the potential to change the way the game was being played, given that level of disruption and how much suffering people were experiencing, right? Because of that disruption itself. And so, that really was where we crystallized this whole core belief that has been underpinning and informing how we decided to, engage our experts in coming in every single week to deliver their expertise in terms of their perspectives on what the best practices were in the leadership development space, from a space and place of being backed by data and research and neuroscience, right? That really was at the get-go where our devotion was lying, where the call was for us to bring in all those experts, the world's foremost experts in these topics of leadership development, especially in and around the human-centric approach. And so, we've been so fortunate to have some of the world's foremost experts in every week. I say this is like one of the best decisions I ever made because I feel like I got a world-class education, university level education out of doing those interviews all these 6 years with all those experts. What a privilege to get to go deep into their wells of wisdom, right? And on behalf of all of you, really get to explore all of these different perspectives just in terms of how we could lead from a space and place of, yeah, being human centric, which to me is all about making sure that we're showing up in ways that actually serve the humans that we have the privilege to lead, right? Really making sure that we're setting them up in a way that is empowering them to go out and play their biggest impact game, right? That really was where all of this mission started in the first place. But over the last year, for those of you who have been following along, I know you've been seeing me shaking things up here in the podcast studio, shaking up the lineup this time last year at the start of 2025. And then bringing in my client, Tracy Allen, to ride shotgun with me, to have that client's perspective and really putting the spotlight on me and illuminating some of my expertise after 20 years in this space on this mission, in and around, the ways that I show up in service to my leaders and clientele in the trenches. And I think you saw coming into the summertime that we really started to play with this curiosity that was opening up for us in 2025 in and around conscious leadership. And, I was giving myself a lot of permission on the show this year to just show up and be really present to what was going on in the leadership development space, what was going on in the ethers in terms of the energy of our world, so that I could show up and go to the helm to co-create consciously. This really is what I feel like drives me the most as an entrepreneur, is that I actually am a very creative soul. I'm a generator. We learned that when we had Micah Gabriella on talking about our different energy types in human design. And yeah, I think you all have borne witness and been witness to some of this next level iteration that I'm about to step into, and where all of that inspiration is coming from. I think what has really changed for me, because I've talked a lot on this show about how 2025 was a gauntlet of change. It actually felt like 2020 to me in terms of the level of disruption that opened up in my lanes of leadership. And I think the result was that, yeah, it really forced me to have to get back to the helm, super conscious, present, and available. But also, I had to go outside the box and I had to start experimenting with some of these, different modalities in the consciousness training arena that we've been talking about on the show, and bringing some of those experts, in fact, into on the show. Because, yeah, like we've been saying, the higher we climb, the more the pressure builds. Add a little disruption and change into that mix, right? And yeah, it really forces us as leaders to have to stay hungry in terms of finding those edges and finding different ways to go deeper and deeper in our consciousness training, so that we can activate the resources that we need to show up to the ever changing pressures and demands of our environment. And I feel like I really cracked a code in the last year in my own efforts to really want to go deep in those explorations. And like I said, give myself a lot of permission to experiment and play in my business in terms of my methodology and some of the cutting edge ways that I am developing my leaders. And I feel like, yeah, that's what hit me at the top of that mountaintop in Costa Rica when I first started channeling some of these creative downloads and inspired ideas in terms of, yeah, just the call that I feel deep down in my soul from an intuitive level, in regards to wanting to create this new space, this new platform that we're going to be launching next week, this new version of the podcast in terms of how I want to show up as a thought leader in this leadership development space and world right now, which is really putting the spotlight on conscious leadership. I really believe that that is what our world is going to require of us leaders more and more. I think we're all hearing about the acceleration of energy that's about to hit. February 17th is the start of the fire horse energy. So we can all feel her energy coming down this pipeline. We've been talking to the top experts on this show over the last year about the acceleration of change that's about to pick up in terms of AI. I know anybody that's leading a business like I am is definitely already seeing just how accelerated a rate of growth we're all going to have to go through in that portal of possibility known as AI. And then, yeah, these future generations that are already coming into our workforce. I'm knee deep in conversations every single week with my leaders talking about the level of change required there. And so I really think that, yeah, I really think we're about to go through a bit of an evolution. And because of the rate of acceleration that I feel intuitively, and again, all the experts are suggesting statistically is coming, I really predict that that is going to compel us humans to have to come back to this helm consciously because that's where new choice lives. And I really predict that that's what is going to be required of human being leaders more than any skill set that we're looked at for, and counted on and relied on for. I think, emotional intelligence is something that we talk about a lot in terms of being the number one leadership skill of them all. But I think it's going to go even deeper than that. I think the level of change that this world is about to see, this evolution, is going to be more of a revolution because I think it's actually going to challenge us humans to have to come back to what humans we're created for, which is we are creatives. I think it's going to challenge us to have to come back to this helm and remember how to create, how to co-create, and how to make new choice. And ultimately, in order for us to be able to do that under all that pressure and all those high stakes, and again, all that uncertainty, it's going to mean that we need to learn how to really own conscious leadership practices. Like we're about to go real deep in our explorations in and around. That, in fact, is the inspiration that I'm excited to announce today in terms of the new platform that we're about to launch. This new version of the podcast is going to be a reflection of this evolution in our mission to change the way the game's being played through conscious leadership. So the new podcast that we're about to launch is going to be called the Conscious Leadership Revolution. And yeah, this is where we're going to give ourselves all the permission in the world to bring in all the different experts in all these different consciousness spaces and arenas. And we're going to really bring in all of that top-notch, progressive, trailblazing, front-of-the-pack strategy in terms of how human beings are developing that capacity, that capacity to be creative and that capacity to be innovative and that capacity to really think outside the box and create the future of work. I really think that that is the creative assignment that we're all about to be dealt as leaders. And I believe that conscious leadership is how we're going to be able to step into and answer that call. So I can hardly wait to launch this new version of the podcast. Like I said, stay tuned. Tracy and I are going to come to you next week where we do a little bit of a warm up and a little bit of a primer, talking about the inspiration and the vision for this new aspect of our mission, this new way of defining and describing our mission to change the way the game's being played, the conscious leadership revolution. But before we let you go, I just want to say thank you again from the bottom of my heart. You guys know you're my inspiration. This is what keeps me hungry to stay progressive and at the front of the pack in terms of how I show up in this leadership development space. I know this is definitely going to be a really innovative approach here in the corporate arenas that I work in. But yeah, I feel so confident. I feel so empowered. I feel so clear and so inspired to want to channel this next level on behalf of all of you because I know I've got my finger on that pulse. I'm in the trenches with you guys all the time talking to you about what you're up against. And I know that this is absolutely what has made, me successful as a thought leader for the last 2 decades since I launched this business is that commitment to showing up in service to what I know you need because I have that relationship with you in terms of really, taking the time to put my finger on that pulse. So please, my last request in that spirit is that if you have any feedback for me whatsoever in regards to this LLP platform this last 6 years of a journey that we were on. If you have any final thoughts, suggestions, or reflections, I would love to hear from you. That feedback is gold to me, So please email me, Susan at elitehighperformance.com, if you want to be able to give me that feedback in private directly, or you can just leave us a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you for subscribing and following along. Thank you for sharing these episodes with your communities, helping us spread that ripple effect as far and wide as we possibly can. I truly believe that this is what our world needs more than anything right now. In case we haven't noticed, the energies that are all around us in these ethers, I think what the world needs more than anything is leaders to be consciously at the helm. And I think, this is what inspires me every day when I get out of bed, is this vision that I hold, in terms of what is possible through this conscious leadership portal of possibility, which is that, I imagine a world where we all get to thrive, which is exactly what we experience as leaders when we step to that helm consciously and take responsibility for the energy that we are actually bringing into this world via our leadership, how we lead ourselves and how we orient consciously towards others. I can hardly wait to go so deep on this very concept in the next version of our podcast. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you all in the next version of our podcast, The Conscious Leadership Revolution, coming up next. Thank you, everybody.